Hello and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation seriously. We provide fan-oriented and analytic discussions on a variety of animated shows, movies, and anime, including Steven Universe, Gravity Falls, Ruby, and Rick and Morty. I'm your main host, Dylan Hysen, and today I'm joined by Melanie Moyer.
Hello.
Today, Mel and I will be continuing our Pixar rewatch, going this time with Ratatouille, which Mel selected for some reason. I don't know. We're kind of not going in order, but
put me on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, I was happy with that. We've gone through my first and second favorite Pixar movies now, so it's only downhill from here for me. But it's interesting because I hadn't seen Ratatouille in quite a while. Mm-hmm. It came out in 2007, which is much like WALL-E. Seems like it was much more recent than that.
It's almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's 8 years ago.
So almost 10.
Yeah, that's how that works. Okay, so yeah, we'll be discussing Ratatouille. This is a retrospective, so we won't really be reviewing it as much as talking about how we think of it now compared to how we thought of it before and how the movie's aged and stuff like that. And we'll probably be doing this for every Pixar movie over the next couple months. I mean, we're going pretty fast through them, so maybe it'll only take like a month and a half, but yeah, and if it's your first time listening, you can get all the information on this podcast at overlyanimated.com. So let's get into Ratatouille. Directed by Brad Bird. Like we said, 2007 release. Mel, what did you think? So we both rewatched the movie, of course, before this. Mel, what did you think this time of Ratatouille? When's the last time you'd seen it? What did you think of it originally? How has your opinions changed?
I had not seen it in like years. So when I first saw it, it was one of those sort of surprise at how good it was, which I learned to not be surprised anymore at Pixar films since then, in the 8 years since those movies have come out. But it was interesting because I think it was an interesting concept going in, and it was just executed really well. And watching it now, one thing that I kind of thought about a lot was, again, the sort of dual narratives, kind of like WALL-E, that were going on here between Remy and all he was trying to do with learning how to be a chef and passing himself off as a chef, and like Linguini stuff with Colette and just the restaurant and how it came together. It was more intertwined than WALL-E stuff, but it's clearly two different elements, I think, and I liked that a lot.
So you liked it quite a bit this time?
Yeah.
You think more or less than from before?
I think it's hard to say because I've seen it before. I still love it a lot. It's still one of my top Pixar movies. So, I'd say, I guess, a little bit less enchanted with it now, but that's also because I know at this point. I mean, when I went to go see it in theaters again, it was just a surprise at how good it was for what the plot seemed to be from the trailers and what I had read online. So about the same, maybe a little less impressed.
just like any movie, seeing it for the second time as opposed to the first time. Yeah. I guess I think I'm about the same way. When I saw it, Ratatouille is one of my favorite, not only Pixar movies, but movies of all time. And rewatching it here, I kind of felt similarly. I had the same kind of general not criticisms, but like critical viewpoints on the movie. And we'll go over those. And I'm like WALL-E, where I kind of have like a different perspective on it, and you can go listen to our one on that to like hear more about that. This one I think I'm pretty similar on. Maybe the viewpoints on media criticism I think stand out more, but I was aware of those at the time too, which is interesting because I was like 15 or something. But this movie. It does have a lot going on. There's like I don't know. There's like two main messages at the end with like all the cooking stuff and then the media criticism, but then there's also Remy has two plot lines, and then there's Linguini, and I don't think any of it's particularly well done from a narrative perspective, which is interesting. I don't know, we'll go over, Mel would have more to say on this, but like this movie, I don't think any of its specific plot threads are that great, but I think it all comes together just very well at the end. Like, to me, this movie starts off like mediocre and then gets incredible. And it's basically just goes up and up and up the entire time. Whereas to me, WALL-E was like great and then stays great the entire time. So I think just for that reason, this is probably worse than WALL-E, but it's just great in different ways, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess, I don't know, when rewatching it, the first thing, and I did remember thinking that, I had remembered that the beginning wasn't all that great, but when rewatching it, I was, pretty bored, I would say, by Remy and the rats in the beginning. The entire sequences with them escaping from the old lady's house and stuff like that. I don't know if any of that holds narrative weight.
No, I mean, it's an interesting way to start, I guess. Like, for the first few seconds of it happening, it's kind of an attention grabber, but I'm not a fan of sort of chase scenes in that sense, especially not with rats. So I think it's fun and it's a nice opener, but I don't think it serviced the character or the story at all, besides sort of the plot pushing Remy to where it needed him to be.
Do you think Remy ends up being a particularly good character?
I think Linguini's a better character of the two, and I actually think maybe even Colette's a better character than Remy. I think Remy's sort of very static and a little bit one note. Not to say that Linguini and Colette have deep things going on for them, but
that's what I would say. I would say I'm not sure there's one good character in this entire movie. Like, that's it. My general thing on this movie is it's great in spite of the fact that none of its plot lines are particularly engaging or none of its characters are particularly great. Mm-hmm. Which is, I don't know, I can't think of another movie that I would say the same things about.
I think this one's weirdly plot driven. If you compare it to like WALL-E, which kind of, I guess, maybe WALL-E's not the best example. Something like The Incredibles, I guess, where it's like clearly character driven and it's character actions and consequences of that's sort of driving what happens. In Ratatouille, it's very plot centric and plot driven, and these are the things that like the opening sequence where Remy's chased out of the house and he ends up in Paris.
That's true.
It's all very plot driven.
Yeah, I also think over the course of the movie I care much more about Remy like successfully becoming a chef than I do about like any specific like anything with Linguini's character or Colette or I don't. It's just like the direction of the narrative, I guess, is what's maybe more important. I'm not sure how successful the Remy and his family parts of this movie are, and they're kind of pervasive throughout the entire film.
Yeah, and it's very typical as well. It's not a new family dynamic.
Yeah, I don't know. I just never really particularly cared if Remy was accepted by his family or as if he cared about that. Or, I mean, I thought it was kind of interesting, but at the same time, it's all just very.
I think it's the sort of flaw in that is maybe how they characterized his dad, because he wasn't a sympathetic person and wasn't someone that I wanted Remy to get approval from. It was a very typical sort of like New York street dad, and I just had no reaction to that.
Yeah, and it's also like the conflict is instigated by the concept of the film, which is hard. Which you accept because it's the foundations of the mythology of the movie. In that Remy is this rat with human sensibilities, even more so than the fact that the rats can talk and stuff. But even more so, he like understands like tastes and culture and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, I can accept that, but then like we're going to drive the plot with Remy through his disconnect with other rats through that. I don't know. It's I guess it doesn't really hit for me that much.
No, because I don't think it was like a sort of important disconnect either. I mean, I guess you could look at it and say like, oh, it's sort of humanity and culture and understanding that, but essentially what it gets down to is that he wanted to cook and the rats didn't want that. So it's not. There's no real sort of heart in or like driving emotion behind that sort of schism and what Remy wanted to do, I guess. Yeah,
and I think it's like very simple. We get it. Okay, enough with that. But then what's interesting is what comes out of it. I think is pretty great, which is the film's depiction of cooking. Like I think the Remy's descriptions and how they animate like the combining flavors and how they do the scenes in the kitchen once he gets to Cousteau's, like I think all that is incredibly well done and probably better than any. I don't know if I've seen the great cooking movies or what those would be, but this is definitely the best depiction of cooking and cooking movie I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the only I haven't really dabbled in the genre of cooking movies, so
like I don't know, I'm not someone who really gets like the cooking in general. I'm not that much of a cook. Hope maybe I will be at some point, but like combining things and understanding like the art of it, like I don't really get it like in real life, but this movie kind of makes me get it, you know. Mm-hmm. Like I buy into it from this movie, which I think is really cool. I don't know, we've like, I guess what I'm trying to build up to here is that this movie's great in spite of these individual elements that don't work. But let's talk about Linguini, I guess, for a little bit. He's it's interesting because he's not the main character, but he's kind of treated as a main character. He's like the prototypical uninteresting male lead, but we don't get inside his head because he's not the actual lead of the movie. So I feel like we're already not starting off on a great footing here with him.
Yeah.
He's just pretty boring to start with. And of course he's relatable. Yeah. He's a young male. You know, it's not maybe more inherently sympathetic to the general viewing audience than to me, who I've kind of soured towards young male main characters at this point. But I don't know. He's just kind of there, I think, for a lot of the film. Do you think his character ever reaches a point? Yeah, you said you thought his depiction was better than Remy. When do you think he gets to a point where he is more than just the vehicle for Remy?
I kind of like the sort of bit, I guess, with the montages when he turns into kind of a big shot, when they realize like that he's like in the will for the restaurant and that sort of thing. I just liked his character better, like watching his character, not necessarily I related with it, but I thought it was more entertaining to watch him than it was to watch Remy.
Yeah.
So I liked that bit about him. I loved the sort of klutzy animation on him.
Yeah.
And the design was actually fairly good too, even though I hate that soul patch that he's got like on his chin. But yeah, I mean, if anything, I think it's more entertaining to watch him than it was to sort of watch Remy's stuff, even if he wasn't. I mean, he's definitely sort of a supporting character who's kind of thrust at you, meant to be read as a main character, but he doesn't have that characterization at all. So, and he's probably one of the weakest characterized sort of Pixar characters as well, as far as human people go, with the exception of, I suppose, being the parents in Inside Out.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's kind of inherent due to like the concept of the movie, right? Because he's just this. He's kind of.
He's literally the puppet.
Yeah, he is literally the puppet. It's interesting because you mentioned the when he's kind of thrust into power, Linguini, and I think that happens like at least halfway through the movie, if not a little more.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what happens in the first half of the movie that's interesting with him or with Remy or? I guess he's like training with Colette. So I think Colette kind of makes Linguini pretty interesting, but she's even more of a supporting character than Linguini, and she kind of gets this introduction where she's basically depicted as this feminist character in this male-centric field, which I do really like that they say, although it's only once, and they say it once, and they continue to only have a male-dominated field, despite the fact that they, like, lampshade it. It's still there. But it's a nice introduction for her, and she's just this prototypical tough female who's successful. What do you think of Colette?
I liked her a lot. She was a character that they really didn't use too much, I think, in the trailers for it, so it was kind of a nice surprise seeing her. Again, there's like one thing going on with her, and that's about it. Yeah. And unfortunately, most of her plot then gets relegated to her and Linguini, because when Linguini takes over the restaurant, she kind of sidesteps and doesn't really do much for the rest of the movie. And even at the end, you know, it's Remy who's coming up with the plan to serve the ratatouille. So I think her first scene with Linguini is really good, and the sort of training bits. But after that, she kind of just sort of falls in the background. Yeah,
I don't really understand her romance with Linguini. It's kind of like the pessimistic depiction of what they do with it is that she's just waiting for. she's this tough woman who wants a guy to be assertive with her. You know, like, I feel like that's a reasonable interpretation, which is terrible. Like, that's like the worst thing in the world. I hate that. But you can also give the movie the benefit of the doubt and just treat that as her having like, as like there's build up between them, and then it was the culmination of whatever. Because like the scene when they kiss is him, like being forced into it, I guess, by Remy. And it's hard for me to get away from that first interpretation because it's kind of there.
Yeah.
She's still, and she is kind of relegated after that, because then Linguini takes over the restaurant and she's still second, and she doesn't. There's at one point towards the end, the movie does try to legitimize her as like a significant player in the kitchen, with like Linguini's sticking up for her, saying Colette can cook too, and like she's seen cooking alongside Remy. But ultimately, she doesn't really do anything to like solve the conflict of the movie. She's just kind of she's kind of like an obstacle.
She gets handed the recipe card for
she's Ratatouille. She's like and she's like, follow the recipe, and then Remy. I don't know. It's all. She's just an obstacle for Remy to overcome, really.
Yeah.
It's like I guess my point is like, even though this movie lampshades, like if this feminist character in lampshades the male-dominated field, it's not. I wouldn't call this a feminist movie by any means.
No, especially since all the rats are also male.
They're male, male gendered.
She's like the only female in the movie.
Yeah, maybe there's another side character, but that's it.
And it sucks too, because she's antagonistic for like the first half of the movie. Isn't necessarily bad. It's just it's like you said. It's portrayed as something that Remy and Linguini have to overcome. So you're not necessarily rooting for her, because I think her thing is that she's a sous chef, I think, right? And she wants to be the head chef, and that doesn't happen.
I don't think she's specifically the sous chef, but I'm not sure.
She's the something.
She's something.
It's something French.
She's the.
Hold on, wait. It's on Wikipedia.
Rotisserie.
She manages a team of cooks that roasts, broils, and deep fries. That's my cat.
All Stewie.
Okay, we're gonna walk away from the cat.
No, the cat's great background noise. Yeah, I mean, I want to like her character, and I don't see her as antagonistic like at all in the movie, but I can understand that that's kind of how she functions within the plot. She's like, I don't know how to describe it. She's an opposing force to Remy, but Remy doesn't not like her. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's tough.
It's a hurdle. She's a hurdle.
It's tough, this depiction, like the depictions in this movie. There's nothing overtly sexist about the movie, but at the same time, it's clearly not.
It's like
great.
Sexist by omission, though.
Yeah, and it's also like one of those ones where a lot of people are listening probably have the response how this movie's like so sophisticated and it's so classy, and like what it's just realistically portraying the state of the world, and it's like that's not. It's not an excuse.
It's a talking rat. It's not. There's no.
Yeah. Well,
there's
one,
no
it's
realistic...
it's a talking rat. Two, it's that I know that the movie isn't going to be blatantly sexist because it's like, I don't know, I think like classy or like cultured and stuff like that, but it also doesn't mean it can kind of be that can kind of be like the most type of sexist thing. Yeah. Is this like reinforcing of the current state of beings by the current state of affairs by like what's sophisticated in our thing being dominated by men.
It's kind of like, first of all, the phrase strong female character is problematic in itself, but the fact that sort of people in situations like this, like they think the portrayal that gets you this sort of feminist female character is like a really aggressive and really go-getter woman and just super duper, like she's a workaholic and she's like says herself she's fighting against the sort of patriarchy of her profession, which is fine because it is realistic, but at the same time I think it kind of flies in the face of the fact that there are so many other ways to depict women that are stronger representations of characters and narrative arcs, and this is just sort of that stereotypical quote unquote strong female character TM.
this is maybe one of the most prototypical examples of a strong female character inserted into a male-dominated movie.
Yeah.
And it's like supposed to be take away from that fact. Yeah. It's not necessarily one of the things that I think about most about it, but it is going to prevent me from saying this is like one of my favorites of all time, even though it's like quality-wise it should be there. We can come back to that, but other narrative elements before we get to the main thing, which is the end of the movie. What do you think of the like ghost of Gusteau as like a narrative thing inside Remy's head? How do you think that functions within the story?
I mean, that's a typical. You hate when I bring this up, but it proliferates all storytelling. It's a typical point used in sort of the monomyth and hero's journey. I'm telling you, it's because of Gilgamesh. We're all just rewriting Gilgamesh. But yeah, I mean that's a very typical thing. I forget specifically what.
Well, how do you think it's used here?
It's mostly comedy, I feel like.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because it's like Remy's depiction of Gusteau in his head. It's not necessarily supposed to be Gusteau like sitting on his shoulder like the actual ghost. I think it's just Remy's sort of representation of his sort of like inner conscience taking on the image of Gusteau, which is interesting. But I think it's more comedy than anything else.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think much of it. It was there. It was kind of a simultaneously comedy and expositional device. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you think of the Skinner, the antagonist?
The chef.
Yeah.
I think the characterization there was good. And by characterization, I mean like characteristics and quirks, not character with a capital C.
He kind of seems like more of a Disney villain than many Pixar movies have.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting. He's just not... He doesn't need to...
He was based on someone. I forget who. I can't pronounce French words, so...
So we might as well not even try.
So yeah. Just know that somewhere in the world there's someone he's based on.
Yeah, well, yeah, so is Gusteau, yeah. I don't think he needs to be sympathetic, and I think he's, I guess, comedic enough that it doesn't matter. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just it's driving. That's what I said. All these, if you break this movie down into individual plot elements, none of them are going to be good. I'm telling you. Like, this is what we're doing now, and we're like, this is not great. This is not great. Okay, but now let's talk about...
I love the movie, but that's, you know...
No, but this is it comes together, and this is what let's get into the ending of it, because the ending with Ego, the food critic, is... I think the entire scene from when he gets the food to once his monologue finishes is arguably one of the greatest scenes ever in anything. To me, at least, it's just so meaningful, and it's also like one of the most valuable scenes, I would say, to any movie. Like, okay, so yeah, but yeah, this movie without that scene, I think, is quality wise is not there, but also just like take away from the movie is nothing. Like, I don't know, like it's still a good even without the final scenes, the movie is still a great depiction of the art of cooking, and it's one of the best like depictions for me as a non-artist. It's kind of, I mean, I guess something about podcasting is art, but not really. Probably not. In theory, it's as someone who's not super familiar with general things with art, it's one of the best understandable depictions of art in media that I've seen, and I really like all the visuals and narrative elements they do with it. But include the end of the scene, and it also talks better than maybe any movie ever about media criticism, which is super interesting. So I just think that first of all, we have that Remy prepares Ratatouille for Ego, and then he gets this random flashback to his childhood, which I'm not sure if people react to it like... to me, I'm like fine with it, but I feel like a reasonable reaction to that would be like, what? This is that had no build up, and it lasts like 5 seconds. What are you doing? I don't know. Do you have that reaction, or do you think you buy it?
No, I bought it completely because they didn't linger on it. It happened.
It just happened.
It was his monologue, and then it was done. It was like, all right, that works.
And then it also just ties in perfectly to the next, which is, I don't know, when does he monologue about things? Is it right after that, or is it? It's
right after that, because he comes
out
of his flashback, and
it's his review. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let me read this because I have this here. So the first part of it is general. and some of the most profound stuff like ever written about media criticism. And then the second part is like specific to the movie. So I guess the first part is more interesting. In many ways, the work of a critic is easy.
Oh.
Cat. We risk very little, yet enjoy a position over those who offer up their work and themselves to our judgment. We thrive on negative criticism, which is fun to write and to read. But the bitter truth we critics must face is that in the grand scheme of things, the average piece of junk is probably more meaningful than our criticism designating it so. But there are times when a critic truly risks something, and that is in the discovery and defense of the new. The world is often unkind to new talent, new creations. The new needs friends. So this is so like ultimately what this movie is it's a depiction of art and of people's reactions to art.
Yeah. No, as someone who majored in a creative field and hopefully will make my living off of creative fields, it's very nice to hear, just because it's surprising, I think, coming from Pixar and Disney, but at the same time not, because again, huge film corporation, they probably, well, then again, they probably don't even care, but I love that monologue a lot.
What's your reaction to it? Do you think it's like true? Do you think it's like an accurate representation of the way things are? Do you think it's maybe a simplification, or do you think it's right?
I think it is a little bit of an oversimplification, because I do think a lot of criticisms and a lot of critics make very good points, and I like to read a lot of what they talk about. And there's different types of criticism. It's not just this is good, this is bad. It's talking about genres or talking about different mediums and just sort of analyzing them is also a form of criticism. So I think he followed me up here. I think it is, on the one hand, an oversimplification and sort of a romanticizing of a really great idea. But at the same time, I also love hearing that a lot, because I think it sort of digs back at people who would turn essentially any form of creative output into a marketable commodity. Mm-hmm. And that's essentially what criticism is about. It's, you shouldn't buy this, or you shouldn't do that, or go see this movie because ... and it's all about marketing and getting a profit. I think what this monologue does is says, hey, these things are created and they're probably a lot better than we give them credit for, and the fact that they were created from scratch in the first place is commendable. So
yeah, I mean, so in the beginning, it's basically making the general point of negative criticism has no value, which I think is I think it's something that needs to be said, but I think it's also something that's been said before, and I think it's something we realize. Like, yeah, like we give legitimacism to the negative reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, and they count as much as the positive reviews, and we care too much about a film's Rotten Tomatoes score. But I feel like, at least for me, this is generally in the discourse of film and television. It's like, yeah, okay, negative review, whatever. It's not that important. But then I think it gets even more meaningful when it talks about how the average piece of junk is probably more meaningful than our criticism designating it so. Like the value in creating new things and new works of art, I think is, and that in the face of media criticism to it, I think is really something that sticks out to me, and is something that's not necessarily always talked about.
It kind of also hits on that saying that critics are sort of disgruntled members of their own field, and that's sort of what they do now. So specifically that line that, the average piece of junk is more meaningful than our criticism designating it so, because we're in, at this point, like you said, with Rotten Tomatoes, where people like sort of thrive off reading film reviews and book reviews and TV show reviews more so than actually sitting down and going to see it blank slate without all that chatter around it. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the second part, I think, of this, because, yeah, it talks about stuff specific to it, but then it says, in the past, I have made no secret of my disdain for Chef Cousteau's famous motto, anyone can cook, but I realize only now do I truly understand what he meant. Not everyone can become a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's also pretty great. And that's like, it's like, I think that's like kind of the ties to the rest of the movie, because I think this scene can kind of seem random, but if you look at it from a lens of art creation and consumption of that art, right? Like the Chef Gusteau's motto is really what's permeating the movie, and I think it's really what ties it all together here.
And I think it's nice that it sort of transcends that idea of cooking and just extends to all sort of creative fields as well, because I feel like that was one of the things that I didn't connect with so well, was that it was about cooking. And again, like, I don't, like you said, like, I don't really have an attachment to cooking and the idea of cooking and the art of it. But the way the monologue was worded, where it ends with not just cooking, like art in general, like no matter what it is you do, can come from anywhere, is really what makes that monologue great, I think, is that it sort of permeates all creative fields.
Yeah, I love that Brad Bird had like the chutzpah to write this in a way that would get it to, that would like just make a broad general statement about our planet, like at the end of the statement, because this can so easily seem just corny and like contrived. But I love that he gets to that line with anyone can become a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere. I love that he uses the word artist. Sometimes you should throw the theme in the audience's face. I think that there are occasions when you really should do that, because here this movie is really subtle before the scene is really subtle with what it's about. And it's not to say what it's about. We're not just going to break. It's not like none of the character depictions and anything of that have no meaning, right? But just in terms of like message and stuff like that, you don't get it before here, I don't think.
Yeah.
And I think it's poignant enough that you can make this statement, this general worldview statement, which I think often just seems contrived, but here is really not, and is really just truly meaningful to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. Do you have this same type of reaction to this scene that I do?
Yeah, I mean, everything up until that point was very specific and very area specific. It was about Remy wanting to cook, Linguini sort of coming into his own as a cook, and this ended up being about sort of creativity as a whole and the way we sort of look at, and that's creativity in anything, even too, like even I think like innovations and inventions, when he talks about we're afraid of the new and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So I think, Brad Bird did a great job of just sort of painting a great broad stroke over just creating things in general, which broad strokes don't tend to work out. So it towed a line, and it towed the right side of the line. And I just think it was a very well crafted, and the way it was portrayed too, like instead of, it doesn't come out as like him monologuing after eating, it's his review. So I think the way it, the medium they sort of used in the film to get it across is very good.
Yeah, just in the context of it, it's incredible. I mean, it's with this character who we barely seen before this last scene, but it's still great. Like, they insert one scene of him before this, of him coming, but I think it makes Ego like one of the most memorable characters from this movie, if not the most memorable character, I would say. Mm-hmm. The most important one. He's like the old age of artistic criticism, right? Like the old guard is kind of what he is, and then it's about embracing the inherent value of things artistically, and embracing new creations. I don't know. To me, this just makes this movie just so much more, meaningful than maybe even any other Pixar movie. WALL-E has great take-home messages, and that would be the other one I would put up here. Like, I also just get a ton out of like the evilness of corporationism from WALL-E, but this is like that's like politically charged, and this is just kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. It's just, to me, it just takes on, like I said, just very meaningful. Mm-hmm. I also think it makes the kind of epilogue of the film, which comes after this, also kind of ties in. It's also very wonderful. Even though it moves fast, we don't know what they're doing. They make a new restaurant, whatever. It's all great, all very happy emotions. Just a very positive reaction to the entire ending.
Yeah.
How do you think this film functions within the context of like film? I don't know how to describe that. But do you think this is seen as what we're talking about, like this very meaningful stance on artistic creation?
Yeah, and I think it was a very unique way of getting there. because if this had been live action, it would have been some sort of like indie, like The Artist or something like that, where it is very straightforward the whole movie, and it is sort of like punched in your face the entire movie. This, I feel like, got there in a surprising way, and it tied the rest of the film together, and the sort of overarching theme that came out in the end through Ego's monologue informed upon and probably bettered the rest of the movie that came before it too. So,
do you think in the context of the world that people think of this movie at all?
Our world?
Yes, our world. Like,
yeah, I mean, it was a big deal when it came out. I don't think people take away from it necessarily what we might take away from it. I think it's still more about, and the way it's still marketed now is more about cooking and that sort of thing. But I mean, it's definitely there, and that monologue is very blatant. So
it is definitely very blatant. Yeah, I don't know. To me, this should be like one of the foremost movies about filmmaking and stuff like that in general. Like the filmmaking community, especially recently, is super big on embracing movies about making film.
The Oscars, that's number one shoe-in thing that will get you in there.
And like the current example of it this year, yeah, Birdman, and this year is Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl, is like an indie coming of age movie, but it's really, I mean, that won every award at Sundance, mostly in part because it's also a movie about filmmaking. And like, I think it's fine to like, for a group of people to embrace movies that talk about themselves as finding that more meaningful. Like, I think that's just kind of nature, is to find human nature to find things.
Stephen King always writes about writers.
Yeah, like I think it's fine to place more value on that. But I also just like, I think this movie should be like one of the number one entries in that category to me, because even though it's not about filmmaking, it's about filmmaking, right? Like,
no, and it is, and there's so many things you could pick apart from Ego's review, between like how difficult it is to be someone who's a filmmaker or a creative type, how difficult it is to deal with media criticism, and how stupid media criticism can be sometimes, and how it's sort of worshipped when it really shouldn't be. And there's just a lot of things going on in there that permeates the entire like filmmaking, writing, artistic field that maybe people didn't take away as much as they should have. But
yeah, I mean, I think people took it away. I'm just concerned with people still not talking about this movie at all.
Well, right? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's not something that held up as like the sort of one of the great scenes talking about creativity in filmmaking.
Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, this is one of the movies that was like a few years before the Oscars started doing the 5 to 10 Best Picture nominees. And this and WALL-E would have been nominated for a Best Picture if they had that rule in place before the Toy Story 3 year. I think both of them would have been, actually. But so it might not be seen going forward as remembered as one of the all-time greats, but I think it really should be. One last specific point. Do you think this kind of monologue is unfair to criticism? Do you think it kind of strips it away of any value?
Well, like I said, it's kind of oversimplifying criticism, because criticism comes in a lot of different ways, and it's more than just this is good, this is bad. But at the same time, I do think a lot needs to be said about anyone who can just get on the internet, have a blog, and then say, look, I'm a critic. And it's sort of like advanced trolling in a lot of ways with some of these people. So I think what it says is good. I do think it's a little bit of an oversimplification, but I also don't think he was criticizing that type of criticism.
Yeah. I think it's I don't think it necessarily strips criticism of all meaning. It's just making the point it needs to make. It doesn't also need to say, yeah, but it still also has value. I think that kind of is inherent in the fact that this takes the form of a review. Mm-hmm. I think that's another good use of that. Yeah, like it's a review about how reviews are bad, but by the fact that it is a review also gives reviews value.
That was very Joss Whedon of them.
Very Joss Whedon of them, yeah. Okay, so I don't want to try to speak for you here, so I'll phrase this in terms of me, and you can tell me if you relate to it. Okay, so
right.
So I just talked about how much this is incredibly meaningful to me, and how much this, like, maybe this ending has maybe more value than almost any other movie I've seen. And at the same time, right before that, we talked about how this movie is also very male-centric, and there's like one female character, and it's not necessarily blatantly sexist, but it's kind of
Passively.
There's another word I'm looking for, but let's just say passively sexist.
Blatantly sexist.
Nah, not that. But we don't need to guess at synonyms.
Synonyms.
No synonyms.
Thesaurus.com.
No, it's the thesaurus.com. But like this is like something that's a message that's incredibly meaningful to me, tied with it not being something that's one of the most things that's one of the things that's maybe the most important to me, social issues wise. It's the equality of genders and gender roles and stuff like that. And it's this movie presents this weird dichotomy that is often present in media I find meaningful to me, is that it's great and I connect with it, but at the same time it kind of breaks this number one issue to me. It's male dominated, and it's kind of just sexist on its own, and how do I deal with this, right?
Yeah. Especially when he's saying, when he has his monologue at the end and he's saying great artists can come from anywhere, and it's sort of brushing aside completely this sort of plot point they put at the beginning that Colette's trying to work her way up in a male-dominated profession, and that could have easily been worked in. That could have been
one of the points as well. And also, it's just, this is like a male critic talking about a male depicted rat controlling a male human, working at a restaurant with a deceased male chef, right? It's just all of this revelation is about that. So how do I it's like personally, I like super connect with any female-centric feminist media work that is also meaningful somewhat to me. That just hits home really hard for me. But for this, it's like something that actually did, which like the meaning transcended this frustrations that I have with it. And it's like, should I try to temper those because it's so male-centric? And even if this is something that's not as important to you, the listener, not to Mel, but even if feminism isn't your number one social issue, which it should be up there, but it's even if it's not, like, how do you merge your connection with something with also something else you care about, which didn't necessarily like permeate that reaction you had to it? I don't know. This is very high level stuff.
No, I understand what you're saying. Is how do you say this film is profound and speaking, saying great things, but at the same time ignoring the fact that it's still only males talking to males about males, and that women are still sort of, and other minority groups are kind of not actively not included, but sort of not included by omission from this sort of great sentiment about creation and artistry and filmmaking.
Yeah, so I don't know. How do you personally deal with this?
I mean, I do. I spent 22 years dealing with it. No, and that's the thing. Like, I look at Colette and I look at the way she's portrayed, and I'm like, on the one hand, yeah, that's great. At the same time, I'm like, you're trying too hard, and you're trying too hard to say this is a strong female character and this is what a strong female character looks like. And when she's surrounded by guys, it just feels to me like men are saying to me, this is what a strong female character looks like in film. And it's that they have the one, it's always just the one token female in the background. And it's like, yeah, we have female presence, and it's like, well, not quite. And yeah, it does kind of suck that you've got this great monologue about how a rat can cook and a rat can be considered a great artist. And it's shown from the very beginning that Colette's been, like, we sort of have in medias res with her, where she's starting out, trying to climb her way up, trying to be recognized in her own right as a good chef. And it doesn't really happen because Remy's story takes precedence. And Remy's story is the one that's getting the nice monologue at the end about artistry, not hers. So to me, that kind of isn't great to see. I like that she's present. I like that she is someone who is respected in her field at where she is right now, but it would have been nice to see more of a story for her. This cat.
more than specifics about this movie, though. Like, I don't know. This is maybe too personal to try to answer. Like in life, when you have this incredible reaction to a piece of media, but this media is made by a man, like for men, like should you temper I always screw this word choice up, your reaction to that? Should it affect how you think? Does it affect how you think?
It does affect him, I think, a bit. Yeah, I mean, it's just naturally sort of because the majority of the filmmaking community is male, so they're the ones who are trying to tell these stories about women, and it's not necessarily something I want to see. It's not to say that male writers and male filmmakers don't have an opinion and don't have vested interest in this topic and this sort of struggle towards gender equality. But
do you think it has lessened your reaction to this film? It's hard to know for sure because it's an instinct. It's not something that you're deciding, right?
Yeah, no, instinctually, like I do react strongly to this film. But when I sit down and think about it, yeah, like that, like when I was watching it today, like, yeah, the depiction of Colette kind of bugged me a lot, so.
Yeah, I mean, I mean more than Colette, you know, like I'm talking.
Yeah, I know, in life, so like.
Well, I'm not necessarily like in this movie. I'm not necessarily talking like I'm talking about like it being all males with regards to this emotional ending. It's just all males involved. Not necessarily the lack of Colette specifically. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the lack of sort of females in general as well. Yeah. The fact that the entire cast is male.
And then do you think that this, so for me, I feel like I react strongly to this in spite of the fact that while the movie's going on earlier, I do think about the gender depictions in this movie. And again, not that this movie is the most blatantly sexist thing, but it is male-centric. And do you think this means that I'm not intrinsically valuing feminism in media like highly enough? Do you think that some intrinsic element of myself is not matching my conscious thought about this issue? Like I know this is very
just like you're on the couch.
These are very high level questions, but no, I think this is the perfect movie to talk about this with. Like, do you think it devalues myself, me claiming that feminism is such an important issue?
No, I think what it is, it's the product of the environment. I mean, you're saturated, and you being like the general you, like everyone, is saturated with these types of things. And, you know, like what was it, the year, I think it was 2011, it was 75% of speaking roles in film went to males. And it's the fact that that's what you're taught to see, and that's whose stories you're taught to follow. So you've got these great sort of, like, if you look at Ratatouille or something else, you've got these great stories about sort of underdogs and overcoming obstacles, and you want to react to that because you say, yes, this is a good story, that's something I want to relate to. Latently, though, you think about it, and it's like, well, why did it have to be about guys talking to guys about things that guys should do, and it's all about men? And it does suck to realize, well, maybe I've been watching films wrong. Maybe I'm still kind of reacting to it wrong, but it's not something you can just switch off either, because it's like encoded in our brains at this point for how we watch media and read books and that sort of thing. So should you feel bad about it? No, like, because you recognize it. You should feel bad about it if you're defending the idea that males are heroes and the stories we should be telling. Like, yes, absolutely, don't be doing that. But if you're consciously looking at it and saying, well, now I'm seeing this and it's not as great, and I don't want it to hinder the way I view this, and I'm afraid that it's not hindering it enough. Like, I think thinking about that at all and talking about it is enough. And the only way we're going to get over all of that is more women in filmmaking. So
you're saying, so this is actually, I think we've arrived at something that I hadn't necessarily concluded for myself, which is great. So you're saying because just male centric depictions in our media is so pervasive, and I was kind of thinking, is as a male, does this say something about me underneath? But you're saying just for it, this applies to everyone because this is what we're used to consuming.
Yeah.
And you're saying, like, just because this is the way it is, this is like ingrained in the way we've grown up, like, viewing media, and it's possible we're just going to react stronger, maybe even more strongly, or just we're going to react in general to things with these male-centric depictions because that's what we've been consuming all this time.
Yeah, an interesting tidbit about that, and the fact that it is just everyone. Is the first time I read a book that was a book series, like a fantasy series that wasn't male dominated. It was His Dark Materials, better known as the Golden Compass in the US. But the character in that is, the point of view character is female. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like 14 years old, thinking, wow, why would he choose a female character? And then asking myself, wait, why did I ask? Why would he choose a female character? And realizing that these stories, you know, sort of heroic or overcoming obstacle stories are male coded. Like, you think about a protagonist, you think about a hero, the first thought is usually always a dude. And it's it's something that is pervasive everywhere. I mean, if you just think about any sort of type of story, if you sit down and think about protagonists, it's usually always guys. So,
yeah. Yeah. Do you think that we're going to react because of this inherent because of this? Like, I think you're presenting this like a nurture depiction of media, right? This from like a nature nurture perspective. Do you think that because of this male centric nurtured consumption that we're going to react more strongly to meaningful things presented with a male viewpoint, or do you think that we're just naturally going to react to those and it can't be tempered by all the other social cognizant parts of us?
So what do you mean?
Do you think it's going to be more meaningful because it's male centric, because that's just the way we've been consuming media, or do you think it's just that we can't prevent ourselves from it's not necessarily it's going to be more meaningful than a female centric one would be, but we can't temper the reaction, I don't know, to the male centric revelation, like good depiction thing. I don't know. I think
So I think if I'm understanding you correctly, I don't think you can really control that.
Do you think it's going to be a stronger reaction for men, or do you think it's just going to be that you can't control the reaction?
I think you can't control the reaction, but I also do think there might be an element of guys sort of looking at films about guys and thinking, yeah, that's great. Looking at films, same exact plot about a woman and thinking, oh, that's a chick flick.
Well, yeah, but now we're getting back into the is it me versus me rather than you feeling this way, then I think what we start out feeling that way a lot because, again, like it's saturated. So yes, I think it's everyone. Okay, yeah. So I think that yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna I can't disagree or agree. I don't know. Like this is stuff that that I don't know for sure. This is stuff that I've not thought about significantly. Basically, I do like what you're saying about the the ingrained. I respond very well to nurture arguments. I'm a very much a not a nativist, but it's saying that we can't control on a base level reactions to male centric things. Do you think? And I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think I just basically accept what you're saying about that. Do you think this can ever? I think it's very.
That's like the first time in I think 10 years.
I said this recently too. I'm like, I'm just gonna take what Mel's saying at face value, and you were like, whoa.
Yeah.
Do you think that this is something that can change?
I think it very much is. It's this, you create different narratives and you create different stories that have different types of protagonists. And obviously now, like someone like you and me and generations here now, I think it's a little bit too late to fight that basic.
Do you think it's too late for us?
For us? I mean, possibly, just because sort of like theories of Kant's box apply and you're not going to be able to fight something that ingrained in your brain. But if you've got like a 3-year-old kid and show them like, I don't know, something like Brave, and not that that's a great movie, but female representation or other female heroic films, or like some future version someone writes of a fantasy novel like Harry Potter that's all about females, then they'll start to learn that, it doesn't have to be a male story and you don't have to code these stories as any gender.
Yeah.
So I think for people like us, we're past the point where we can control that reaction. What we can control now is how we sort of react to our reaction.
Do you okay? So yeah, I mean, maybe it can change. It can definitely change the younger generation if we're going from a nurture perspective. Yeah. What do you think the reaction that me or you should have to this movie?
I think we should say yes, like it's sending a great message, because I also don't think the fact that Remy's coded as male devalues what he went through, and what it's saying. At the same time, I think we should also look at it and say, well, why aren't other groups giving us this message or receiving this message or included in this message? Like, obviously, yes, it's a rat, but it's a male-coded rat. So it's a dude telling a dude, yes, you can cook. Like,
should the message have less meaning because it's so male-centric, or should it just be like message star asterisk, you know?
Yeah, no, and that's the thing I always struggle with, and this is something I struggled with Boyhood, is that, you know, how much of that story gets devalued because it was a white male protagonist. And on the one hand, I don't want to devalue anyone's struggle, because just because you're in a majority demographic group doesn't mean that things you're going through and sort of pain you might be feeling is frivolous and not important just because you grew up with a certain level of privilege others did not. At the same time, you know, it's very easy for a guy to tell a guy, yes, you can go be head chef of something, than it is for a guy to tell a girl, yes, you can be go head chef of something. So it's like, it was easy despite the fact that, again, he's a rat, he's coded male, it's easy for Remy to do what he did. It would have been, I think, a much more poignant story and more difficult story if it had been about a female.
Okay, rat. So maybe what you're saying is like, no, it's not less valuable, but maybe it would have been even more valuable. Maybe it would be more meaningful. Okay. Yeah. And so, like, I also want to just draw a distinction between, like, Boyhood, which I think we probably saw similarly. Like, Boyhood, like, I'm saying that, like, sometimes you react to something like Ratatouille and you're not going to be able to control your kind of more of an emotional reaction to it. Boyhood, I didn't look at Boyhood and have this revelation and then say, oh, wait a minute, everyone was white and male in that movie, so it doesn't count. For me, I was, like, thinking that the entire time. It's like, wow, there's
Plus, you're looking at the title, you're like, okay, Boyhood.
Wow, but first of all, Boyhood. First of all, I'm not connecting to this kid. And second, and it's like, oh, wow, everyone's white here. I was thinking these things throughout the entire movie. It's not like I was changing my reaction to it at the end. That was something, so, like, in terms of, it's also not like I'm saying that I always react to things regardless of my social views. Like, no, sometimes it just comes into play while you're watching something. And I think that's different from here, which is, I'm saying, is maybe more of a, maybe I wasn't actively thinking of, because I think Boyhood's a good example. Neither Boyhood nor this are actively anything. Like, Boyhood isn't actively sexist, but at the same time, it's just super, like, privileged or whatever. And with this one, and I thought that at some point with this movie, and then it gets completely set aside for the reaction at the end, is I guess what I'm saying. And I think and that's in the perspective of it don't devalue the current, what you get out of it now, but maybe it would have been more with the other one. Yeah. I think that might be true.
Yeah. I mean, it's not, there's no perfect way to look at it, but that's essentially how I have taught myself to view such things, since, you know, that is obviously something that personally I see in every single movie I watch, is that, yeah, I mean, no one's struggle or story is less valuable or less important just because there's someone out there who had to struggle a little bit more. What we should be doing is showing those stories of people who had to struggle a little bit more.
Yeah. And I would really have a hard time saying that that I should try to lessen my reaction to this movie.
No, and you shouldn't. I think you're fine on that front.
Because we just, like, before this, we spent, like, a solid 10-20 minutes talking about how the great messages that came from this.
Yeah.
And I don't think those are diminished, you know?
No, it's just asterisk, you know?
I mean, yeah, I don't know if the specific asterisk, like on one hand, yeah, that's, like, the best way to picture it. But, like, maybe it's different. Maybe it's, like, the message and then the medium that the message was portrayed in, and maybe those are two separate things. That it's like the message is still there, maybe
so it's like the message is non-gendered, the medium was, kind of, I guess.
maybe that's too optimistic to say the message was non-gendered, but I that's how I want to see it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't. It would be hard for me not to see it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, there's a scary cloud outside.
No, I don't think that. No, that was. Do you think we got there on that?
No, I think we did. I mean, I think this discussion could go on forever.
This is obviously a much larger discussion.
Yeah, and it's something interesting, I think, to take out of something like this, because that's not something I expected to have this discussion.
You didn't think I was going to go there with this?
But I think it sets up nicely for other things, especially in films like The Incredibles, where you've got a lot more female presence.
Yeah,
but again,
even
it's
though
still about
The Incredibles is still a male-centric. Yeah, so yeah, I didn't expect to go as deep as we did, but I did expect to connect these two things. I didn't know we'd go there, though. I think that's deeper than I've been on a personal thinking level about that, which is rarely happens because I'm just in my head all the time, so I don't know. Nice. So cool. Let me know what you thought of that, guys. Cause,
got through it.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you think of this? Well, so let me know what you think of literally what we said, right? Like, do you think we're right? But at the same time, also let me know about these type of discussions on the podcast, because that's interesting too. A lot of people, I think, really loved our previous podcast and this podcast for these types of discussions, and this might have been the most in-depth one ever. So that's interesting. Yeah. Okay.
On Ratatouille.
Yeah, on Ratatouille. I mean, I think it's the perfect movie to talk about this for. I think it's the movie to talk. And we got into it a little bit with WALL-E, and it's kind of would we have even gotten here if we didn't go WALL-E into Ratatouille, right? Like, maybe that's the perfect way.
See, I had a plan when I randomly.
Yeah, you had a plan. Okay.
Couldn't spell Ratatouille. And...
The movie's poster has the pronunciation of Ratatouille on it.
Just in case.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm never going to spell this word right. I'll have to spell check before I put the podcast out. But so yeah, okay. Going back to the specific movie for a second. So overall, I don't know if you want to I don't know. To me, it's like a 9.8 or a 9.9, and it's like this. I would, as I'm remaking my Pixar list, this is still number 2 for me. Where is it for you?
It's. Trying to I don't list as strictly as you do,
well,
so I'm trying to remember. So it'd be it's probably in my top 5, if not my 6. It's up there. It was another, that and WALL-E were because those came out kind of close to each other, were 2 movies that literally I just came home from school and watched, because I'm someone who watches movies 1,800 times. So I loved it a lot, and I still do like it a lot, and I like now that we can have these discussions about it. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely in the top 5 or just outside of it.
Okay.
I have to formalize a list.
Here's a question, because we seem to be in agreement on Ratatouille basically for what we're talking about. Yeah. But for Inside Out, we're kind of on different sides of Inside Out.
Yeah.
And I feel like you took a lot of meaningful things away from Inside Out, whereas I really only for a few seconds. To me, I look at Ratatouille and I look at Inside Out, and Ratatouille had such more of a visceral reaction to the messages from that. Are they on the same level for you? Because I don't think you could say that. I think that they're similar quality movies, whereas the message in Ratatouille was stronger. I'm not saying you should say that, but that's also that.
That's an argument you can make.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I do. I think I like Inside Out better than Ratatouille, and I still connect with that sort of message in Inside Out a little bit more than Ratatouille, even though Ratatouille was probably more specifically geared at someone like me. But yeah, I mean, and it's also interesting because I think that Inside Out was kind of towing a line as to being way too obvious. And I think the premise and the context made it seem like it would be way too in your face, but it managed to not be. So I think I'd have to look at sort of the layers of execution that these 2 movies have with their messages, because Ratatouille's kind of comes a little bit, not necessarily out of left field, but it's something you didn't expect them to say at the end. Inside Out, it's there the entire time. Yeah,
Inside Out, I was expecting messages on depression the entire movie. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd have to look at sort of how narratively those messages get sent across, but
these are all I'm
still partial to Inside Out.
Okay, yeah, and like I said, quality of movie can be different from take homes from it. Yeah, they're also just so different. This is talking about kind of a social like artistic aspect, and Inside Out is talking about a very psychological thing.
Yeah.
Pixar hitting on all facets of life in Take Homes 4. No, but seriously, it's like it really is though.
Yeah.
And last one talked about social Wally talked about it's like social responsibility, environmentalism, corporationism, stuff like that. Oh, well, we covered the entire map of the earth
in terms of
lives,
what
of
social issues you can find.
Yeah.
What does Finding Nemo have?
Well, we'll have to rewatch it and then talk about that. Probably. Yeah, family stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there you go. Boom. Unconventional family.
Yeah. Okay.
Modern family. One might say.
We'll discuss Finding Nemo. That's one I've seen so many times, and like, I don't know. Because that was the one they just always showed at school when there was like a teacher or a substitute teacher, So
I still remember the first trailer for that too, with the
that's
the
a little
ocean
too. I think that's a little too far back for me.
No, I remember it.
Oh man, good memory.
Oh yeah.
Okay, that's all. That's all for this week. This was a draining one. I'm Dylan Hysen. This is Melanie Moyer. Where can we find more of your stuff, Mel?
Twitter at Melmoy, Tumblr, themelmoy.tumblr.com. And then I post articles on things that I watch and have opinions on blackprint.com, spelled BLVCK print.com, which Jeff has informed me has a scrolling issue.
I won't comment on that. And I'm Dylan_OVA on Twitter and Dylan OVA on Tumblr. Tell me your reactions to this one. I'm interested.
If you got through it.
Personally, this was great for me. This is like what I want.
Toongal, I know you're out there.
No, like Toongal and associated people. Yeah, like it's to me this is like exactly what I want to be talking about with these. Yeah. But we'll see how other most. I'm not gonna say our Steven Universe episode reaction podcasts are gonna be like this deep. Like this is. Maybe this is just the best medium for it. I also think this wouldn't happen if it wasn't just a one-on-one podcast, which is why I've been just specifically wanting to do these.
I also think it works because we're not reviewing anything. I think in those Steven Universe ones, you're going to have to balance reviewing episodes with talking about them.
Yeah.
And this is just retrospective completely. So I think it lends itself a lot to these kind of discussions.
Actually, yeah, that's true. I think we did really hit on the retrospective part of it because we just talked about our reaction to the movie and it led into this other discussion based on that, which I think is what we should be going for. Cool.
Yep.
All right. Overlyanimated.com links to all of our stuff. One last thing, guys, that I'm starting at the end of this podcast. We just launched our Patreon, and I'm very excited. It's Patreon. You can just check us out on patreon.com/overlyanimated, and we'd really appreciate any support you can give us here. Thank you. That's gonna about do it. We'll get onto the other Pixar movies soon, maybe. I feel like we're doing too many of them.
We need to back off.
Yeah, but there's not new episodes for the ones we're going to cover yet, so we're trying to fill until July 13th. But yeah. All right. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Adios.
Bye.